Welcome to the show, everybody. We're coming to you live Tuesday, November 12th. Coming in red hot, all-time high. Oh my gosh, I could not be more excited to dive into this with you today. I mean, it's crazy.
Dude, it's gonna be 100K by the end of this week. Is it gonna be 120 by Thanksgiving?
Grab a drink. It's time for another episode of Off the Record, on the Rocks. Join Michael Toner and Ankarino as we discuss the latest in all things Web3, AI, metaverse, and crypto. Tune out the noise and turn up the signal as we pour ourselves into the future. Better make mine a double.
In all seriousness, I could not be more pumped to be diving into post-election. We kind of got a couple weeks under our belt here coming to you in November. It is all-time highs. We got a lot to get to in today's show. We're going to talk about Trump election and the Trump bump. We're going to talk about our boy Elon Musk's possible role in the administration. Had some interesting Web3 news from McDonald's today that we're going to get to. We got Bitcoin Federal Reserve, our boy Gary Gensler, chat.com. We got a lot to get to. Let's start with all-time high. The factors driving Bitcoin surge, the impact on the crypto market. I feel like every day, folks, if you are paying attention, consider what this means for you, your retirement, your 401k. Those old ETFs we were talking about for months are soaring. Tell me your take. How you
They're
feeling?
soaring, and because look, we have spoken about the Bitcoin effect on markets generally, and really that's come to just crypto markets because, as everyone likes to say, the rising Bitcoin brings up all the boats, brings up all the cryptocurrencies. Now, it may not bring up all the little altcoin crap coins that are out there because there's literally millions of tokens now. But we all know, you know, I know, our listeners know, when you talk about Bitcoin, it's really easy to talk about Ethereum. It's easy to talk about Solana. It's easy to talk about whatever your favorite token is that is building the next cool game. It's easy to talk about things like Polygon, talk about things like whatever blockchain McDonald's is going to be partnering with. All these people are going to be surging because Bitcoin is surging. So all-time high, I mean, I was a little off. I was thinking by the end of this week, we could be at 100K. At time of recording, we are at exactly 89,000, pushing 90, which I think is another one of those thresholds. So yeah, for everyone who doesn't believe that this is real and important, I think especially as we head to some of these new topics that you just rattled off for our agenda, I think we're going to see that now we might have a moment in time where things like Bitcoin and the spot ETFs and Ethereum and those ETFs are going to start making waves in traditional markets. Is there a time next year when we'll say, hey, Bitcoin just crossed 130K, eclipsed the Berkshire Hathaway shares, and then caused them to tumble? I mean, it's going to have this effect in traditional markets.
You are seeing day by day this reporting of Bitcoin's market cap, 3 trillion, just past silver, just past gold, now on par with Nvidia, like literally comparing Bitcoin to the market caps of individual companies. My hot take on that is if you're talking about Bitcoin as compared to individual market caps of companies, you're not aiming high enough because it is its own market. It is, as you say, rising tide lifts all boats. If we're comparing it to Nvidia and we're at 90K for Bitcoin, then yeah, 130 seems reasonable. 250 all of a sudden seems reasonable when you're talking about the global economy and the size of the market of the global economy, not an individual one company. We're talking about scale.
And a company that has humans who have offices, who live and have families, and who can be gotten to. When the indomitable Liam Neeson started the franchise Taken, I want to say there's 6 or 7 or 8 of them because he keeps taking them. It's that there is going to be this like rise where it doesn't even it's not even apples to oranges. It's like apples to doorknobs. because the digital thing that is going to be available to billions of humans to purchase is something that is not available to most humans. I mean, sorry, is not like the stocks that are by comparison are not available to most humans. If I want to go buy a share of the Berkshire Hathaway stock, which is at $110,000 a share or whatever, if I would like to go buy some Tesla, and I live in a country where they don't allow me, or I don't have the funds to get a broker's account at a Schwab and purchase these things. Well, what can I do? Well, gosh, I can open up Venmo and Facebook chat and all these other random things and start purchasing crypto. And I'm just some 13-year-old kid living somewhere halfway across the world.
So, I mean, what you just talked about is the Everything app. You mentioned getting some Tesla shares, so I got to bring in Elon here. And we're talking about this crazy crypto run right now with Bitcoin taking off. It has massive implications for somebody like Elon Musk, who we know understands crypto. He gets decentralization. He understands blockchain technology. He gets the implications of Gen AI. And he owns now the most powerful media company, despite what some may say. You know, X still thriving in terms of this ability to be an everything app. And if all of a sudden there's deregulation and his boy, he just goes down to Mar-a-Lago and says, hey, we got to push the new update out on Monday. The new X algorithm going live. Oh, you want to call it back to Twitter? Oh, yeah, we'll call it Twitter. And oh, by the way, it's on chain. You can send money now just by at messaging somebody, and it runs on Doge. That is now possible in this new deregulated environment. And when I say you're not thinking big enough, we're talking about Bitcoin, we're talking about the price action, but I can also say that those scenarios, those types of new industries that can get created now that have kind of been like held at bay by the regulators. Everybody's been too nervous. You know, Amazon tried a little NFT project. Starbucks tried a little NFT project. Well, I'm going to get to the news about McDonald's today, but
Yeah.
there's my other signal, which is the market's now ready. The players have changed. The environment's now different. And I knew everybody was going to be feeling rich in October into November. This isn't the way I thought it was going to go, but the market is going to market. And we are, I don't know how to get back to Elon here, but
Well, I mean,
he's
get
going to
back
have
to
a
Elon,
seat
which
at the
is,
table.
well, Elon, let's just talk about for a second, just backing it up. Now, let's not forget that Elon has been referred to as the Doge father. So there is no scenario where Doge just disappears. In fact, there's only the scenarios that it just gets more and more public. It may change its name and its format and may become the payment layer for X or whatever.
The
But I'm talking about
Department
going
of
down.
Government Efficiency. You heard this, right? The Department of Government Efficiency, Doge.
It's you can't write it better in a script, because the part that's going to be extra crazy is how all of this has been flipped. Remember, it was the regulators that stymied things. How many times does Elizabeth Warren have to say that if you hold your own crypto on a thumb drive that you're a terrorist? How many times does Biden and his administration have to say, if you transact more than $600, just a hair, it's about the same price as buying a PlayStation 5 and two controllers in a game. If you do that with crypto, well, you might be a human trafficker and you're going to have to report that. And then you have all of these committees where if you do something, like you said, the Amazon things, the Starbucks things, the Meta things, that then cause you and your CEO to get called to Capitol Hill and answer all these questions every time you want to innovate. If one thing could come of the Doge father is to say, innovate. The United States is about
Let him rip.
pushing boundaries. We're going to do it. And then what's going to even to wit, it's going to be even crazier, is everyone has this idea that you got to shoot, rockets with all the fire and all the stuff and all the everything. Well, there's a whole bunch of guys now who are talking about creating electric powered rockets. So if you can recharge your Cybertruck and drive all around, Maybe you can just recharge your Falcon 1 and launch it from Mar-a-Lago's swimming pool patio. Like maybe the guys at Cape Canaveral are like too expensive. And oh, well, when you have all that fire, all the guests in the VIP suites are going to be burned to death. But if you come over here to Mar-a-Lago and we just say, just over by the jacuzzi, get a lawn chair and watch my silent electric rocket take your wife and your pal
Headed to
up into a
Mars,
little
baby.
weightless orbit where you can like see Mars through the window and then take a picture and come back. I mean, what we're, I think, going to see, leave your politics aside for a second, as a technologist, as a futurist, as someone like us who like to, just pushing of the envelope into all these new Web3 areas. Fortunately or unfortunately, the Doge father is someone who has the resources and now apparently the political access to just start doing stuff. So I feel like this is going to be the next couple of years where America starts going crazy again. Talking about space races back on, talking about mining on the moon. I mean, where are the Doge servers? Oh, I don't know. In the Bay of Biscay, it's going to start turning into this wild thing. Like, did you say Bay of Biscay or Bay of Tranquility? Doesn't matter. There's a camera where you can look at it. And by the way, look at the moon where we all hang out and count our money. Like it all feels science fiction-y, but suddenly just right in front of us to grab.
I mean, it is crazy to think about Musk potentially joining the Trump administration, what his influence could mean for technology, energy policy, space exploration, you name it. And the uses all, I think, pointing back to blockchain, cryptocurrency, and now Gen AI. When you mentioned coming to Capitol Hill, I always think about Zuckerberg. And I think Zuckerberg versus Musk right now has got to be an interesting dynamic with Meta. We saw some news a couple of weeks ago about Meta all of a sudden making their AI available for national security implications to the military. Really kind of you, Zuckerberg, right before the election, I believe. And now here's Musk, pumping out real-time AI with Grok, which failed miserably during the election. I don't know if you caught any of this, but if you were chatting with Grok, asking it about real-time polling coming out of the election, it was not performing to the level and standard that you would expect. It was hallucinating. The AI was not functioning properly. I did not do it myself. But that was the rumor on the street. So it's interesting.
Well, I heard about that, and that they can't even get a live stream going, without delays for 30, 45, 60 minutes. At some point, like YouTube didn't snap their fingers and do that, back in 2003, 4. They didn't just magically know how to deliver live video. It took a long time, it took a decade to change. So, it's a process, but is that what defines the future of Web3 and AI? Like technical difficulties? I hope not, but that's currently where we're kind of at.
I want to get into some Web3 news, but before you do, I want to stick on Elon and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. I want to talk about two things. One, you did hear some news right after and as we're going through this pump, Senator Loomis making some news coming out about the desire, and even I think Trump himself talking about the use of Bitcoin as a new Federal Reserve, a flight to safety ultimately. This is fascinating to me that now there's public discussion about Bitcoin as a new backing for the Federal Reserve. Give me your hot take.
Yeah, I mean, look, the hot take here is one that sometimes you have to make changes that feel uncomfortable in the moment to really advance and really develop. And something that does not like dramatic change is the Federal Reserve. Why would an elite group of a handful of families, maybe 6 to a dozen, who are able to loan money to the government and do so without any input from the President of the United States? Like when you just say it like that, I don't think most people in the world know that there's this relationship that exists where when the President of the United States is like having a tough row to hoe, that some guy whose last name may or may not be Vanderbilt, might just show up and say, well, we've been here for a while, and like, how much do you really need? And here you go. And oh, by the way, let's just raise the interest rates on this, that, and the other thing. I think they love that power, that institutional power. So like it or not, there's going to have to be a big question asked, which is that the way that the United States moves for real into the 21st century. We stumbled for the first 24 years in this new century with the old antiquated systems. And little by little, we're going to have to change them. Who knows? Maybe when the Federal Reserve gets rethought, we might get to a place in our lifetime when things like the Electoral College get rethought, that we'll have antiquated, hundreds and hundreds of year old, again, United States is a pretty young country, right, relative to the world. So hundreds of years doesn't sound like much, but we've been doing the same darn thing for hundreds of years. And clearly it's not helping the average American do things like get a house and feed their children. So what's the path forward?
Look, watch this connection. I think we're talking about a deregulated market. Our boy Elon Musk, you just described like elections could be more efficient. Car titling could be more efficient. Home buying could be more efficient. Buying and selling stocks could be more efficient. The way I run medical and healthcare data, all of that, when you apply technology, can create a lot of efficiency, time gained, money saved, real tangible value that can be created. And a lot of that value, I believe, was completely stonewalled over the last 4 years by one man, specifically by the name of Gary Gensler at the Securities Exchange Commission.
Don't say his name twice. He might show up.
And we've been following this guy when he was pointing the finger at AI, trying to tell us to pay attention over here. And I don't know, man. I just saw today Apple is doing a documentary about Sam Bankman-Fried's life. I don't know if you caught this, but he's back,
No.
baby. If Apple is doing a doc about SBF, he is back. And my point there is that Gensler is gonna he may or may not be around before Thanksgiving. We've made this prediction one other time. I'll make it again 2024. Let's go. I mean, is he going to make it past Thanksgiving? Does he stick around till January when Trump takes office? Either way, Gensler's gone, and we're going to usher in a new SEC chair who is going to be crypto friendly, period, the end.
I mean, and maybe Gary's goose is cooked. I mean, the one thing that every single person in the Valley has said, and this is a good maybe segue talking about the Valley. The last point I want to make about Federal Reserve and my hot take is one that's just purely based on why it can only be good. And the word I'm looking for here is the transparency. If we're going to have a strategic Bitcoin reserve, then we will have value and American wealth on the blockchain. If you have American wealth and value and the backstop, and however it's being described, of the Federal Reserve on the blockchain or some portion of it, then you have some transparency with which to explain to average Americans why their dollar is valued the way it is. And all this obfuscation and hiding of information and secret deals to give loans, and the way that things like the World Bank and the IMF and all these things kind of exist is because movement of fiat capital is by definition and by necessity by the US government, it's shady and it's like secret and weird. So are we going to snap our fingers and make the Federal Reserve suddenly like a big glass house we can all peek in? Of course not. But the steps of deregulation and maybe pulling away these weird appointed jobs that allow more or less civilians to be extra powerful, that has to go away. Because as long as there's that disparity that exists, the United States will never, ever dream of true equality from its citizens. So I put that one, we just talked about that, but now let's talk about the Valley, because all these technologists have been thwarted at every turn, right? You have old Bradley Garlinghouse and the Ripple team, the ones who are constantly under scrutiny of being a security, the Howey test. You have Gary Gensler, who has this Mr. Burns kind of fiendish look about him. And he refuses to answer any questions directly ever. I mean, literally, the guy is like one of the worst people to be interviewing and or bring to Capitol Hill. He doesn't tell you anything. So you got old JD Vance. JD Vance, I want you to hear from JD Vance. He's a real bulldog in here. He's going to come in here and tell these regulators what for. Well, who does JD Vance really work for besides old T-Dog? Who are his best friends? We were talking about this before the call. Like the who's who of Silicon Valley have Vance in their pocket. And
Peter
they
Thiel
hate.
comes to mind. These guys have been pouring money in behind JD Vance. And if they had a vengeance against Gary Gensler, seeing JD Vance in that tweet basically destroy Gensler properly is a fascinating lesson in money and politics. Because where
Fascinating
is he
because
getting that opinion from, and why, and how's it informed? I don't know, but I know it's well paid for.
well, and if every one of your pals, and again, remember, let's not forget Vance was a VC in the Valley. And when you're a VC in the Valley, I can guarantee you know everyone. There's a woman I went to high school with. She's now a mom in my kid's school. She is a VC in the Valley. Why? Because she was employee number 12 at Google or 122 and just sort of amassed enough money on Google stock to leave Google and become a VC. That's her only ticket in. But she now knows all of them because they all these meetings at the Rose Hotel up off Sand Hill Road is the same 120 people. These aren't like you're not minting brand new Google employees number 12 the same way you're not minting new billionaires who come from Oracle or come from these old traditional computer hardware guys. And when you have these scrawny little pencil necks in Washington saying, no, I don't think that we can allow this right now, so we're going to reverse sue you and just stop all innovation. Can you imagine how frothing at the mouth Silicon Valley is right now about just saying, oh, now we can do that project. Hey, Zuckerberg, remember when we were going to try to do that Libra and make our own cryptocurrency? We can do it now. They're not going to tell us that we're terrorists. We're not going to have to be answering questions about de-dollarization in the Valley in California. We can just innovate like we used to before all this started happening. So I think that we're going to see, unfortunately, Vance extra empowered by his very rich pals. And they're going to start a march, fortunately, for hopefully the opening up of innovation again for not just crypto, but for AI generally, as we kind of plow forward Web3 into the second half of this decade.
I mean, it is fascinating. Yeah, I don't know if we'll put that tweet in the show notes, but there's a video of JD Vance, again, taking this really hard line. I think we've made the prediction once. I'll say it again. We'll make it twice here. Maybe we were a year early, but I find it hard pressed to believe that Gensler makes it past Thanksgiving. Or he does. He hangs on till January. Either way, I think he's gone one way or
I think we
another.
were right. It's just we never said which Thanksgiving. It was about this time last year that we called it. And, sometimes it takes a year to just have things shake out the right way.
Yeah, no, it's very, very, very true. And all of that, I mean, between the Bitcoin Federal Reserve, Gensler, this whole ethos of deregulation, I mean, that's really for me what it is going to usher in this new wave of innovation, this new wave of technology. New companies will get minted again. I talked about this back in the summer, but it just feels like all the AI innovation that's been pent up, all the Web3 innovation that's been pent up, these two things now on a collision course. And some of them starting to show themselves in very interesting ways. We saw a domain acquisition making its way into the news, which is fascinating in 2024, that chat.com making headlines with the acquisition from OpenAI, I think 15 million for just the domain, and buying the domain from Dharmesh, famously from HubSpot, one of the developers at HubSpot, co-founders, I think
a co-founder, CTO, yeah.
Yeah. Who had this domain, chat.com. It's a direct swipe at search. I think you could say search is dead or dying, and it is becoming chat.
Oh, it is dead.
And
dead.
I'm going to chat.com to ask my AI agent when I have questions. This is going to be the future of customer interactions, of learning and development for all kinds of use cases. When it has AI enabled chat, it's now an assistant, it's a coach, it's a verbal note taker when I need it to be, it's a summarizer when I need it to be, it can explain instructions to me when I need it to, it can answer my questions, it can do a lot of things. And apparently chat.com, 15 mil.
I mean, the thing about this that is very interesting for me personally is that I lived through Web 1 boom in the late 90s. when domains were being bought and companies were being bought. Let's not forget, there may have not been domain purchases that were in this highest level of 10 and a half, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 million. But let's not forget, guys like Mark Cuban were able to sell companies that were really just URLs, launch.com, for $1 billion to Yahoo, and became a billionaire without doing a whole lot except for figuring out how to buy a URL, create a company, and then sell it. Now, in this case, selling just a URL with no company, now that's a magic trick, right? Selling the kind of the whole fake company and the whole promise of launch.com or broadband.com or whatever, that requires actually a fair amount of effort. In the case of Darnesh, which makes you sort of, smile that 25 years later, right, from 1999 to today, 25 years later, we actually have learned to work smarter, not harder. You didn't have to stand up a phony company and then trick some idiots to buying it. Instead, Darnesh, he didn't buy this URL a long time ago. This guy is smart and has resources. He paid $15 million for the URL like a year ago, knowing what was coming, and then turned around and sold it just for 15.4 or 5 million for $0 for pure equity in OpenAI. Because guess what? You can't just roll in and buy equity at OpenAI. You got to come to the table with the Saudi Arabian gangsters and Microsoft and Meta and Apple. And Darnesh is like, hey guys, I got this really cool URL. And I think it's going to be really important. And talked enough to old Sammy Altman to say, you know what? Even though we're in an app-forward economy, there's still a lot of Chromebooks around the world in developing nations where someone still has to type a URL into something. I think you should probably get chat just by itself, because GPT, it's a little weird. Just chat. And by the way, you just raised a $172 billion valuation. I mean, you got 15.5 million around. And by the way, I don't want any cash. I just want to have a little piece of this, Sammy. I love you. I love you, Sammy.
Gosh.
And Sammy said, yup. Snatch that thing up. That's just a rounding error. And plus, he's got a HELOC to the tune of $10 billion. Doesn't care. So it talked about working smarter, not harder. It took Mark Cuban, a lot of King's horses and a lot of King's men to gin up a fake company to sell Yahoo. And I don't even know how much was cash versus stock or whatever. But this guy just said, hey, I'm a smart guy. I'm a CTO. I'm gonna do the thing that gets me at the table without having to be at the table. And I'm saying, you know what? Hey, clap for you, friend, because he did something that literally no one else could figure out. And he did that on the 25th anniversary of Web 1, which is pretty amazing.
I love it. He did, however, share that he sold the domain for more than he had originally paid for it. And Sama Altman, Sama on Twitter, just chat.com. That was the tweet. What a cool story in the tech world. That'll go down in tech lore for sure.
25 years later, like that's how long that cycle had to mature of what does a URL really mean. And when you think about that, just as a concept, I think something that we haven't talked about yet is this idea that I'm now seeing more clearly, which is browsers by their name are antiquated, right? Where do you browse? Oh, I don't know, Mom, the bookstore. Well, good. Hey, I hate to tell this to you, but those don't exist anymore. Where else do you browse? Oh, I don't know, Dad. The album shop, the record store. Oh, I'm sorry. Those don't exist anymore. Where do you browse? I browse on this web browser thing that it's just, I have to, because I have to go to these URLs. No, you don't, Mom. There's a phone with these little apps on it. You hit buttons and you go places. You don't have to know anything about a URL or whatever. But actually, there is some value suddenly to a browser. A browser is like an omnipresent app. A browser today is like what X wants to be. If on my browser Firefox or my browser Chrome or my browser whatever, I can go and send you money, I can go and buy movie tickets, I can go and book restaurants. Well, eat your heart out, Weibo and everybody else who's making these apps. The browser was the original everything app. And now you can do full video rendering and stuff in browsers. All of a sudden I'm realizing, oh, Sam got it. Chat.com to me says the browser is going to become the new X app, and whoever can get their browser ready fast enough. Gosh, who's at the table again? Microsoft, Who else? You know, Google. Just start naming people. What do they all share? They all have browsers. And who doesn't have a browser yet? Well, Facebook doesn't really, and Sam Altman doesn't really, but he just bought the URL, and now I'm wondering, will there just be a chat.com browser
You
that
just
is
go
built in
into
with
it, and you from
your
there you're
assistant,
in the
and
new
you walk
wormhole.
down
Yeah.
the hall, and you're in the new wormhole, and suddenly this notion of social media, of the metaverse, of Twitter as the original, gets upended because Sam will say, "Hey, if you can't ask the assistant where to go," I'm thinking Matrix and that little guy with all the keys on the key ring. If Neo can't get the keymaster to run down the hall and open the right door, how's he ever going to know where Agent Smith is? How am I ever going to know where the movie's playing? How will I ever know where my restaurant reservations are? I think that this is going to be one of the biggest just sea change
Flip it.
moments. And it all came back to this simple concept that a universal resource locator might actually be the start. Chat as the ultimate app to lead you into everything you do in your life.
A
And Apple,
universal resource locator. I mean,
that's what
that's
URL stands for,
what it
right?
is, man. That is
That's
what it
that
is.
guy with all the keys in the matrix, right? So the Oracle was the browser, Neo was the user, that guy with all the keys, he was the URL.
Chat.com. It is loading in your browser today. If you have not played with ChatGPT, please get in there. I was commenting on some LinkedIn posts today of like creatives are so stuck in and not wanting to experiment, not wanting to play, not wanting to learn, not wanting to even, acknowledge that these tools exist. And to me, first you fight it and then you acquiesce. And in the same way, crypto, first you fight it and then you acquiesce and you build a federal digital reserve. I think the same is true with AI. First you fight it and then you do your job with it. You create with it. And out of that creation will be new forms of value, new marketplaces, and new economies of scale, of the global scale that Bitcoin can now support and that crypto can now support. The rails, this new modern rails for efficiency are right here. And I want to get to the Doodles McDonald's news. So we go from
man.
all of that, like this pinnacle of like what I just described in efficiency. And what is the piece that we're missing? We're missing the mass adoption. We talk about this. You and I have been doing this show through the bear market. We've been going on 91 episodes talking about the intersection and the collision course of these technologies and all these niche little brand programs. We saw from Starbucks. We covered that. We saw Amazon dip their toes in with Avalanche. We've seen the luxury brands and the metaverse, implode on itself. And what were we always talking about? This mass adoption. What did I see yet but a cryptic Twitter post from Mickey D's announcing the launch of a partnership with NFT project The Doodles. Now the on the surface, like, oh, who cares, Doodles? Well, first off, Mickey D's like put out a date. I think it's November 16th or 18th. So they're like saying we're gonna make a big announcement, right? That's weird for McDonald's. They don't need to do that. They wanted to make a big announcement. They could just make it.
Mm-hmm.
They're preempting the big announcement, very Web3-esque, that we're gonna make a big announcement. The big announcement is clearly a graphic of this Doodles artwork. Now, Doodles, one of the NFT projects that blossomed during that summer 2021, but if you start connecting the dots, who's most connected famously to the Doodles? None other than Pharrell Williams. Who's Pharrell Williams connected to? He is currently serving as the creative director at the world's largest luxury brand, LVMH. Pharrell Williams as a doodle, bringing IP, probably in cartoon form factor, but nonetheless owned IP to the biggest brand on the face of this earth. Don't you think that that's got a lot of implications for the luxury brand over here that says, man, we'd really like there to be mass adoption. We'd really like to have all of our luxury products on chain for resale and provenance and authenticity, but we can't seem to get it to the masses. Hey, McDonald's. Hey, Mickey D's. Hey, Pharrell, can you give him a call? Let's do that with the Doodles. And I think that is very strange heading into the holiday season, right on the heels of a crypto-friendly election in the United States, where all of a sudden maybe this partnership was probably just waiting in the wings. When you're McDonald's and you've done enough experiments, when you've got enough team and engineers to play and trial and error these types of new rewards programs, that's what I'm talking about. What is the reward going to be from McDonald's? They're going to be launching some kind of on-chain rewards. That's my call. That's my
I
prediction.
love that call, and as you just said all that, I mean, first of all, they couldn't have picked a better partner. I mean, talk about leaning forward with Pharrell, big time. We saw plenty of things over the years. We've been doing this for years, 3, 4 years now. From Nike to Artifact to, like you said, Starbucks with whoever they partner with. Just these kind of rinky-dink implementations that smacked, I think we said, of those old CD-ROM experiences back in the day where you put the CD-ROM in the computer and you have a map of Australia and you can like click on the Billabong and a video comes up of a guy talking about what that means. And you're like, oh my God, it's incredible. That's really what Starbucks was. But it harkens back to something that we talked about, I think, early on. In fact, I wrote a big LinkedIn post about this, which is the evolution of thinking about the Internet of Things, because that was what dominated speech at conferences for a good amount of time. 10 years ago, people were talking about it, IoT. People thought it
Oh
was like a new
yeah.
job posting. No one had any idea what that meant. Then people start to get to it, and it's like, oh, I get it. Everything's kind of internetified. And it's like, well, yeah, but that kind of doesn't play out in real life. It plays out in conferences. Well, I talked about IOB, which is the Internet of Behaviors. And if you're not steering into enabling the behaviors, I think that's such a fancy way of getting to what you said about mass adoption. You know, McDonald's has been making steady moves to figuring out what is the behaviors. Well, what are some examples of this? How about I go pull up at a drive-through and say, may I please have the Travis Scott Cactus Jack meal? And it's an off the menu secret thing that I have to have a behavior to know about to go get. Then what happens? Well, suddenly they triple their prices and people still want to go get it because it turns out McDonald's, hey man, if you're picking things good, fast, and cheap and pick two, well, then I want it good and expensive because it's fast. So you are seeing this internet of behavior shift that they're steering away from like talking of ownership or fractionalized ownership, all the things that we talk about the beauty of what the chain can do. Because guess what? When I go get my Cactus Jack meal, I'm going to own it and it's going to get a share of my stomach. And no one else, and you have to ask me if you get a couple of fries, So it's already implied. It's the internet of behavior. I'm acquiring these things. So I feel like there's going to be this, if Pharrell's smart, it isn't about sticking no offense to anyone who we know who has done stuff like this, but it isn't about sticking bejeweled handbags into some weird 3D metaverse and wandering around and showing off your fashion. Like that was an old view of what someone might do in a metaverse, all visual and like 3D gamified. Now it's like, no, you're going to be in the real world with your glasses and be able to have this incredible interaction
Yeah.
with a brand, but based on your behavior alone because it's already assumed that it's internetified. You don't even have to say it. I think this is a huge sea change too. It's a big one for me.
I think I like it a lot too because you have a built-in audience. I think the Doodles is a 10K collection. So there may be 5,000 unique holders. I don't know. You could go look at the stats. They're on chain. And all of a sudden you've got a really small micro influencer group who didn't even know that's what they signed up for. I do not hold a Doodle. I looked at the floor price last night. I think it was at like 1.6, 1.7 ETH last night. It is up to 2.6 currently. So on this announcement, the floor price of a Doodle NFT rising almost an ETH in value. You're talking about $3,000 in value because there's IP attached to it. And if all of a sudden that IP starts showing up on Happy Meals boxes, don't you think the owners of that collection, if they're getting rewarded, if they're getting paid for holding that intellectual property and licensing it to a global brand like McDonald's, there are now new reward mechanisms new markets being created, new economies being formed, because that never existed before, where I don't even need to eat at McDonald's, but I can still profit off of licensing my intellectual property from my Doodle to the world's biggest brand in terms of brand recognition, no doubt in my
So
mind. So
so that begs a question, because we talked about the Starbuck and how sort of they're set up, and will the Starbuck have a certain value versus a Delta Mile or these reward programs? Do quick service restaurants, the QSR category, for example, McDonald's, do any of those guys have loyalty programs in any meaningful way, or were they always considered too low budget to even contemplate that?
yeah, it's a great question. I do know that I've been through a McDonald's drive-through in the past 3 weeks, and there is a scan your app. Now, I don't use the McDonald's app, but I'm guessing that
Hmm,
it's keeping track of either my order. I'm gonna go
right.
download it. I will do it the next time
Yeah,
I
I'm
go
gonna
through a
have to go look
McDonald's
or do some
drive-through.
research on this, because now I'm wondering, as Louis Vuitton starts to wave a magic wand and say, "We'll partner with you," does that by definition bring up, even though they've already done that with their prices and their availability and their cool cultural integrations and collabs, but does that make McDonald's suddenly poised to be you pull up to a drive-through, oh, what's your loyalty number? Or let me scan your thing. Okay, you just earned, 16 nasty clowns or whatever, whatever their 50 little Ronald faces smiling at you or whatever. Like if that's
Mickey
something that
D's.
the little Mickey D's, that could be the thing that suddenly separates again the relationship that people have with these kinds of services and brands. That's a really really cool one. I can believe the people at McDonald's are pretty smart. They know timing is everything, and they didn't jump the gun on this and spoil their audience against a loyalty slash NFT thing that they just don't understand,
Yeah, and
which
it
is
to me
interesting.
screams long-term project because it's 2024. Doodles has been around now for 3 years, which is a crazy thing to think of an NFT project.
Yeah.
But and they've got the backing of um, I say substantive celebrities, right? It's not a rug pull in that same way, and so it'll be interesting one to watch on the Web3 horizon. To me, it is a through thread of now all of a sudden you've got McDonald's stepping and dipping their toe into the waters, with what feels like a longer term crypto play, Web3 play, use of the blockchain in some unique way that only McDonald's could execute. And timing is everything. It's so true that if they had announced this 3 months ago, it wouldn't have made any sense. But at the height of all time highs, it gets everybody fired up. And I'm fired up knowing that we've got one more supermoon
Mm.
in November. We've been tracking these supermoon cycles. I saw it come up. It is the last one of the year, I believe, next week. Here we are. So, I mean, I do think while we're on the call that Bitcoin just passed 90K. So we were
No.
pushing 90. I think it bumped up just above it. It may have brushed it 90.45,
Yep,
$90,045
yep, yep, yep. Looks like it.
and broke through that resistance before retracing a little bit.
Wow, that's
That
crazy.
ceiling, I mean, not financial advice, but you're not thinking big enough. If you go back to where we started at the beginning and
Yeah.
everything we just talked about, and I connected all the way down to McDonald's. They're not explicitly talking about Bitcoin, but if we're talking about the US government and the Federal Reserve and Bitcoin, and here comes McDonald's with an NFT project, I'm now screaming from the rooftops, people. We have been doing this for years. We have gone through the bear market. We have followed all of these brands. We have watched every one of these experiments. We have followed the regulation. We have followed the money to bring us here, the starting line of what is going to be a innovative boom, the collision of blockchain and artificial intelligence.
And I'll put one punctuation mark on that, which I think is a beautiful way of wrapping it, is that kind of like to use, say, a Vegas analogy. Sometimes you're sitting at a blackjack table and the blackjack table goes, quote, cold. Why does it go cold? Well, you and your 6 friends who were there for someone's wedding, suddenly every card coming out of the shoe is just these low rags, and everyone's busting on weird 22s, hitting 5 to a 20 and still losing with the dealer showing an ace or whatever. And sometimes you got to just shuffle the deck. And we all know that right now, because of an administration change, there's going to be the necessary shuffling of the deck, right? We're going to get a lot more face cards out this next round. We're learning who's going to be Secretary of State, of Defense, of Agriculture, who will be replacing Gary Gensler eventually, like literally changing out all of the face cards in this deck and redealing the game. And so similarly, we see the same thing happening in Silicon Valley, right? It's not like all of a sudden all these people come out of the woodwork that no one's ever heard of to start doing stuff in tech. The same way they're not coming out of the woodwork to just do stuff in the government, right? I think we're long gone sending like Jared Kushner to, Kuwait to like speculate oil prices or whatever he was doing. So if that's true, then what we're going to see are all of these people finding their new roles. And we may have a political shroud covering the technology moves, because already in the background, what we watch for next week around the supermoon is, okay, what happens when the guys at Chat GPT or OpenAI get discouraged by Sam Altman's product roadmap? We have the Helen Toners who are worried about effective altruism, worried about people like Mark Zuckerberg saying things like, well, I think we should use our AI for the DOJ. All of a sudden, there's all these things that are being said that make some people uncomfortable. So a lot of people at that time left ChatGPT and OpenAI to go to this thing called Anthropic. Well, why is that interesting? Well, then Anthropic, which is this huge company that's producing all this new cool AI, including Claude.ai, which is for developers that people I know use at their company. Well, that's Amazon's thing. So Amazon just announced just yesterday, I want to say, Jeff Bezos came out and said, hey, don't forget about me, everybody. I'm Jeff Bezos. Remember, I have rockets and I'm rich. I control media outlets. They're not, digital, but I have some newspapers. And I am going to move Anthropic off of NVIDIA. Remember that stock you were also excited about that was supposedly the unlocked in the metaverse? Well, maybe it's not about putting on 3D goggles at all. Maybe we don't need all this computing power. I'm going to go with my AWS stack and not NVIDIA. Well, what does that mean for the guys who have literally like quadrupled down on chip making to power all these things that maybe aren't the ways that AI is going to be leveraged, because AI might just come back down to chat.com. So as the decks are shuffled in the government, the decks are being shuffled in tech, everyone's going to restack their hand and start playing that poker game again. And this next year, much less these next few weeks, might be one of the most exciting times in technology that we've ever seen together. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I will do it again next week. We will start looking forward towards the holidays. We will start looking forward towards January, CES, the technology in the background making its way to the consumer products. How does AI show up in my next Samsung TV? What is it going to look like? I like that Anthropic take. And we'll do it again next week, sir.
So great seeing you. Keep an eye out looking for the heavens. The moon is going to be wide and broad.
That's all the time we have for this episode of Off the Record on the Rocks. Join us next week for more news and all things Web3. Check, please.